if we really cared about crime, we'd crack down on prescription drug abuses. We'd crack down on meth. The opioid crisis would be the war on drugs too, a war harder. But instead, it's seen as a public health crisis because the victims are white and they need help in counseling.
Yes.
But I remember when it's us, when it's black folks in particular, there's tanks in the streets of LA. They're wiping folks out in Oakland. When it's Muslims and Arabs, it's the war on terror and the removal of surveillance. And I want to talk about, fighting back and defending yourself. And your book, which I finished yesterday, it just lingers in my mind because you make a very persuasive case that the Second Amendment, which gives all of us the right to bear arms, it's not all of us. Each time black folks historically have exercised that right, your book, through really just shocking moments of violence that I did not know about, you detail how white rage and white supremacy did everything in its power to quash that black right. And specifically, white supremacy has spread and has been able to endure through violence and terrorism, and the weapon of choice has been the gun. And your book makes the case, very persuasive case, going from Philando Castile all the way back to black troops, that each and every single time white folks saw a black man holding a gun, even if he was deputized, even if he was a fellow soldier, they would see him as a threat and kill him, hang him, lynch him. If black folks were literally in their house, defending themselves, standing your ground, you give this example of how a white mob came and literally wanted to massacre the town, and the black folks had to rally to defend themselves. And ultimately, and this is not, don't worry, this is not a spoiler alert. The book makes the kind of sobering case that black skin itself is the ultimate threat to white supremacy. So if black skin itself, Professor Anderson, is the threat to white supremacy, how can black people be safe in this country when they're not even allowed to arm themselves like Philando Castile? It's a question that I had as a brown man. Like, if I was black, what would I tell my kids? How do you stay safe?
And this is where, again, doing that heavy lifting of educating all of us. So do you remember the 50-state protest movement during the summer when after George Floyd was murdered? And you remember how in the top 10 of the New York Times bestsellers that summer were all books on racism, white supremacy, and how we fight back, right? And because you had people seeing that horrific video of Derek Chauvin with his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes, being really cavalier about killing this man. So nonchalant, not worrying about consequences because he didn't think there were going to be any. And you had people just stunned going, how did that happen? That's not who we are. And you had black folks going, well, go like church, well, right? And so you had people running to the books to understand. And do you remember during the summer protest where in Washington, D.C., where there was a young black man and the cops were coming at him, and a young white woman jumped in front of him because to stop the cops because she understood her privilege and her power. You can see how having this young white woman jump in front of a black man to protect him from the cops could send just signals of warning, danger, Will Robinson, danger, Will Robinson. Because if white folks understand how white supremacy really works and the damage that it does to them, then they're no longer aligned with this mess. And so that is what so much of this work is that we're doing. It is to help this nation really. That's how we get safe. That's how we get safe. And yeah, go ahead, Danielle.
Because I want to add, because you saying this about what the top 10 books were during that uprising summer, which I refer to as the internship for white people that ended in the fall.
It lasted 6 months, Danielle.
It lasted 6 months. Yeah, you're right. Is that, Professor Anderson, is that the cause of the white lash that we're seeing now with CRT and curriculum, where I had thought that this was really the leftover effects, the residuals of Barack Obama's presidency. But no, was it the killing of George Floyd? Because then white people are like, how is this happening? Who are we as a country? And black people are like, we've been trying to tell you who you are. James Baldwin said, but you can't change what you don't face, right?
Boom,
you
boom,
can't change what you don't read.
boom.
Is this what sparked it?
I think that this was a key element in it. So Obama's election is part of what I track in White Rage and in my book, One Person, No Vote, in terms of the voter suppression efforts that have come up to try to strip African Americans and Asian Americans and Hispanics and young people and poor people, because I call that the Obama coalition. Of stripping them of their voting rights to make it harder for them to vote. But part of what you saw after 2016, because the voter suppression techniques worked, black voter turnout went down by 7%. 7%. It was the margin of difference. And so, but then you saw grassroots organizations mobilizing, figuring out what those barriers were, and then working with their communities to jump over those barriers, to drive through those barriers, to dig under those barriers, to get to the polls and to vote. So that is part of the backlash that we're seeing. Know that.
Mm-hmm.
But the other key component of it, and this is why they use that, what they think is a derogatory term, woke. I'm like, so you would rather be sleepwalking through this?
Come on. That's
Yes.
what I say. That is exactly what I say.
Ignorant and heedless.
Woo!
Mm-hmm.
Woo! Driving while asleep. I mean, that just makes no sense. That makes no sense. But they use woke as the way to vilify people who are concerned about our collective humanity, as a way of using the N word without using the N word. And it's a way that it was the summer of George Floyd, where that fear of wokeism really began to just deepen and resonate. It had been there for a while, but that, to me, that punctuated it. It was like, how do we stop this mess? How do we stop people from learning the history of this nation? And so they flip it by talking about they want our children to grow up hating this nation.
Yeah.
So, right? And so my thing
That's
is...
what Nikki Haley's doing in her ad.
Right? And so I'm like, okay, so if this nation has done something that would cause them to hate it, don't you think we need to know what that is so that it doesn't happen again? Because if you've done something that would make you hate where you live, then we got to fix this thing. And it is that driving effort to not engage in real conversations. And so it's really easy. Okay, so a friend of mine did a study on Haitian immigrants in New York City. So this is why I loved your story, Danielle. And so what she talked about when she interviewed Haitians who had first come here, and they were the first generation. They may have been here for 25 years, but they were like, yeah, we're going back. We're going back. But they would talk about black folk, African Americans, like, oh, that is not what you want to be. Ooh. They just want a government handout. They're lazy. They won't work. It was all the criminals. It was all of the stereotypes. When she went back for her second book and interviewed the second generation, the folks who had dealt with the NYPD, the folks who had come through New York's public school systems, they were like, yo, we be black. Because this society cannot make that distinction between African American and Haitian.
Nope.
Right? And so
when I look at Danielle, I'm like, that is the daughter of Jamaican immigrant. When I look at Professor Anderson, I'm like, that is an African American black woman.
Right. Isn't it obvious? I mean, and so the inability to make that distinction, but also I think of a book by Noel Ignatieff, How the Irish Became White.
Oh yeah, good book.
Right. Because when the Irish came here, absolutely vilified. And it's like, so how do you move from being vilified to being white? And it was, okay, we have got to demonstrate our hatred for Black folk. We have got to make that really clear that we are not them. We are not only not them, but we can't stand them.
That's how you earn your stripes.
That's how you earn your white stripes. And so this is why knowing that history, knowing how racism and white supremacy is deployed, it means then that when you understand that in places like Tulsa and Ocoee and Groveland, in Fayette County, Georgia, where you had thriving Black businesses in the midst of Jim Crow, folks doing everything they're supposed to do, working hard, investing their money, taking care of their kids. And that white supremacy came in a wave of violence and just destroyed that. When you see Black poverty now, it makes it really easy to go, well, everybody else has made it. I don't know why they can't.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
If you
Upward mobility.
Upward mobility. If you don't
I'm
have
the good one. Why can't they work hard?
Right. If you don't have this history, it doesn't make sense. So we looked at Ocoee, for instance, Ocoee, Florida, where Black folks tried to vote. And instead you got ethnic cleansing where they lynch Black people, burned down their businesses, burned down their homes, burned down their churches, and ran Black people out of there. $10 million worth of Black property was stolen from that community. Wow. Begin to think about what that means in terms of upward mobility, in terms of being able to have the viability to be able to intergenerational wealth. You think about all of those things that become part of the American dream and how that gets wiped out by white supremacy.